I want to take some time to talk about something literally deadly serious that's going on in the United States, and that is deaths of despair. It's not exclusively happening in young men, but it is very pronounced, particularly in red states. And before, I mean, there's words I'm not going to use because there's theory, not without some justification, that those words can be triggering, but, young men unaliving themselves. I have literally seen posts um, of people celebrating that. And if you heard me say it's particularly pronounced in red states, really, you're the one with the problem. That is something you should get checked out. No one should ever be celebrating people in that kind of pain. And it might change your opinion just a little bit if you realized that the uh, the rate of unaliving in red states is particularly pronounced in young Black and Hispanic men. I don't I don't need to really get into why, this time with what is going on, that Black and Hispanic young men in particular might be in despair. One of the reasons the rate of this mortality rate is so high in red states is because of easier access to guns, which is not something I tend to agree with generally. So I do want this to be kind of a short video, uh, but I mean just a few statistics. I think it's Georgia. The rate of unaliving has gone up 65% in the last 10 years. It's also very high in Alabama. I think North Carolina is actually second. Alabama and Ohio, all ruby red states. That is not to say that Caucasian young men aren't ending themselves. These figures don't even take into account overdoses, drunk driving accidents, just poor health choices, even things like obesity, eating yourself to death, misadventure is a common way of describing, like, getting into a situation you cannot get out of, homicide. All of these things are alarmingly high in our population, in addition to just sort of, I mean, I said homicide, but just general crime. I firmly believe that one of the reasons we have uh, such horrible figures on this is because we have such a weak social safety net, and we see, we're told you can be a billionaire too, but if you need help to get something to eat, you're on your own, and if your job doesn't pay enough to pay the rent, too bad, get a better job. There's a lot of callousness in our culture. I find it deeply disturbing, and I want to be separate from that. Now, I went through something that kind of famously uh, Leo Tolstoy, the Russian author, went through, and he actually went through this at the height of his fame and success. But he was very concerned about spontaneously unaliving himself. And he could not be in a room with a rope or a gun or a knife. He was terrified of being, if he was left alone for, any length of time at all, he would do it. And I know exactly what that feels like. It's called ideation, which is just plaguing. And my therapist actually told me about Leo Tolstoy because I said I'm doing very poorly, and I have this fear that I will hurt myself. My life had just fallen apart. I was extraordinarily socially isolated, basically completely socially isolated. My finances were a mess. And I was living in this house, and it had a pretty big kitchen, and there was a knife rack on one side of the room, and then this big like kitchen island in the middle. And to go into the kitchen at all, I would have to not look at the knife rack and walk around the outside of the island, just because there was this weird fear in my life that I would just grab a knife and do something to myself. And although I think my actual risk of doing that or anything else was relatively low, I mean, it's definitely elevated significantly when you're in a situation when you feel that way. Although much more dangerous is to be, planning something, preparing something. But it was an awful, awful experience. And eventually, I just went to the emergency room and I walked in and I said, I know this isn't the best place necessarily to handle this. And I'd had to walk. I mean, it was a wreck. It was Montpelier, Vermont. I walked 3 miles uphill, literally almost the whole thing was uphill, to the local rural hospital and walked up to the head nurse at the intake. I said, I know this isn't exactly the best place to handle this, but I am really mentally struggling right now, and I don't know what else to do. And she couldn't have been more kind about it. She said, actually, this is a great place to handle this. Come in. And I sat down. I mean, I was a wreck. I was weeping, soaking wet. And the nurse talked to me about what's going on. How do you usually do this? Are you in therapy? Yes. And I do take, I was taking some medication. I haven't for a little while. I probably should be back on it. I'm hoping you guys can give me something while I arrange with my, regular uh, primary care provider to start up again. Of course, I'm going to talk to my therapist about the fact that this happened, but in part, I swore to him that if I was ever feeling like this bad about something, I would go do something with it. So, and this wasn't that long ago at all. So if you're there, go to the emergency room. Absolutely. That I can't guarantee that your experience and your reception is going to be as good as mine was. Emergency rooms can be, you know, dodgy places, but there is a crisis hotline, 988, and I actually I want to demonstrate. I haven't checked this ahead of time. Oh, is my phone dead? I was going to demonstrate how to do this. This is like my lightsaber thing. Well, that's disappointing. I was going to try and call. I have called at one other time previous to that, a crisis hotline. I keep doing this to myself. I've got to, like, everything's about keeping things charged nowadays, It's one more thing. I mean, things can just build up and build up. I'll talk about, yesterday I had a horrible production day. I tried to produce 3 videos, including this one. I hadn't planned to call yesterday, so I didn't check if my phone was charged. Uh, but, technology not working, the bills are getting overwhelming. I can't get along with anyone. My stomach always hurts. I'm always sad. I'm always feeling like there's just no point. It's just a pointless, meaningless universe that's just composed of stuff bumping into each other, and somehow, you know, boom, I emerged. I'll say this gets more into metaphysics, although I do think it's a legitimate question in psychology, at least in terms of our relation to ideas like, the divinity, the structure of the universe, and particularly consciousness, which here's the thing, nobody really knows what consciousness is. And I'll say this, in many religious traditions, let's put aside the Christian idea that if you take your own life, it's essentially murder and you're going to hell for that. I don't believe that. However, I also don't believe that ending your life will necessarily solve anything. I don't know. Um, but to an extent, I just don't think we get off that easy to be suddenly non-existent. Uh, so if you think about that, you're probably better off pushing through anything you're dealing with right now to get to the other side, to work on your baseline emotional state, to pay attention to things that are meaningful and beautiful and turn that into a habit of being grateful. You know, because if you build that habit, it will serve you very well. If you end it all, or if you drink yourself into oblivion every night, or you're using dangerous drugs, to the point of accidental self-destruction, I mean, even accidental self-destruction, um, you're not going to solve anything. I really, I tend to suspect, I don't believe, I don't put a lot of, credibility into beliefs. I think it's an overestimated phenomenon, but uh, that you will pick up right where you left off if you do that. And nobody wants that. I guarantee you, even your casual acquaintances don't want that. Strangers like me on the internet don't want that. So 988 is the crisis hotline. Those people, they're totally non-judgmental. They will put you in touch with therapy that can help. You may need medication. Yeah, again, you may need to go to the ER right now. If you think that's what's required, turn off the video and go to the ER, and nobody can judge you for it. Not even the people at the ER. Okay? Your life matters. If it didn't, it wouldn't have happened. I kind of believe that. We're all participating in this human project together. Now, look, I've read Fight Club like 6 times, like, you're not a beautiful and unique snowflake. Even if that's true, it doesn't mean you're worthless. It doesn't mean that anybody wants you to be in this kind of despair. And look, I have social problems all the time, and I'm kind of a loner. I like spending time alone. It's not. Sometimes I say I hate people. It's not necessarily that I hate people. It's that I often feel better when they're not around, kind of a thing. So please, 988, if you or anybody you know is at risk of that, get help, because I can assure you it can take some time. It will not be easy, but it can and will pass. So please, as always, take care of yourself.